iron. All right. Well, I say let's go ahead and dive in. Jeff, if you're good with that, I will start sharing my screen here
Yeah,
and
and
we'll get the
I'm
ball rolling.
recording now as well.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So again, if you're just now joining us, I am Dr. Meagan Sanders. I'm in full-time instructional design at the Alamo Colleges District, and I also teach part-time for our freshman seminar courses, or general courses, right? General education courses at San Antonio College. It's just one of our sister colleges in the district. So I'm really honored to be here with you guys today. And this is a first for me with this conference, and I hope to be able to attend or come back again next year. So I guess I did mention we're in San Antonio, right? San Antonio, Texas, where it's about 1,000 degrees right now. Anybody feeling that?
Yay.
Oh, I hear a couple. Yeah,
So
yeah.
are you at home right now or are you at the office?
Oh, is it someone who needs to mute? Do y'all mind? Thank you. All right. I know that can be funny when we have a big group of people. We get a lot of the interesting side conversation. But anyway, today I just wanted to say I have allotted some time toward the end of the presentation that we can have a little bit more of an interactive discussion. So I just wanted to present some of the things based off of my own lived experiences in higher ed, and basically as a graduate student first, and then eventually as an instructor and as an instructional designer, because all of those hats, yeah, I think as educators, we know that we're always improving, or we're looking for ways to do things better, smarter, more efficiently. And with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So again, a little bit about me: online teaching, instructional design, those are my subject area expertise. Where my heart really is lately is in the ethics side of things. So that's why this track really spoke to me when I submitted for this conference, because I think a lot of the conversation right now, whether it's in the news or whether it's chatter amongst faculty or wherever we see it in these pockets, right, throughout our institutions and throughout society as a whole, there's not a big consensus. And so I don't know if there ever will be, but the idea is that we're going in a similar track together, and we're not all off on these wild tangents. So that definitely speaks to me as a lifelong learner too. So next, our objectives for today, we just have 3 that we're really going to focus on. We'll explore the balance between the AI advancements that are up and coming, right? And then the ethical practices in academia. I do want to highlight the key challenges and then the different considerations that we have when we adopt AI, or any kind of AI, specifically generative AI is what we'll talk about. And then give some strategies, not just from me, but from you guys. That'll be the interactive part towards the end, with how are you implementing AI? What are your ethical policies? Maybe how do your personal views of ethics and moral use of technology like this, how did those things kind of merge to be a part of your professional working environment, and how you eventually model that for students? So I think ultimately what this does is it encourages the development of those policies that maybe you have in place at your institution. Maybe they're currently being tweaked or in that kind of developmental phase, but that's not only going to align with the ethical standards, but also with academic integrity, kind of like we heard with our keynote speaker this morning. So the importance of this, as we all know, safeguarding, right? We want to protect data, and we want to protect our users, which could be us as staff or faculty, or it could be our students.
345.
Oh,
371.
All right, let's, Jeff, is there a way to mute everyone? Pretty please. Thank you.
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you. Transparency and accountability, right? We want to make sure that if and when we choose to employ any kind of AI in what we do on a day-to-day basis, that we are saying, hey, I've used AI for this. I think that's kind of the bottom line, is being transparent with our own use so that we are modeling that for others. And then ethical policy development, I'll share later on our district policy, which is public, right? That's in all of our syllabi and everything that can be found online. And then one that I've also tweaked for my own classes, which I am happy to share for anyone to beg, borrow, and steal. Now, kind of as we move into the abstract side of things, right? I like to have a visual. So many of you are probably familiar with Rogers, who kind of coined this Everett M. Rogers, excuse me, his diffusion of innovations, where he has the nice bell curve. And so if you take a look on that very far left side, you have the innovators. So that would be the folks who are designing and building and kind of from the ground up, taking these technologies and sharing them with the public, right? And then you have that next little section, which would be your early adopters. Then you have your early majority, which is that first big section on the left. And then as we move into the right, you have your late majority, and then eventually your laggards. So feel free to drop in the chat. I am curious, which of you would consider yourselves maybe an early adopter or early majority? And to give you a better insight into where I'm coming from asking this question, what I've done is kind of tweaked this curve a little bit using my best friend ChatGPT, my personal assistant. I nicknamed him Chatty for short. So basically, if you look at the 2022 year, that would be your early adopters, right? I would consider myself an early adopter because as soon as ChatGPT was available, I got a ping from one of my feeds and I thought, ooh, I'm going to jump on that. I'm going to try that out. And then we kind of moved into the early 2023, late 2023. That would be what I consider your early adopters. And then into this year and onwards, right? That's going to be late majority and laggards. So it's interesting to see kind of where you guys stand, how you have perceived it. I think a lot of times what we perceive can sometimes become our reality in a sense, if that's getting a little philosophical there. But it's important as we realize that this curve is ongoing, right? We have waves of this as well. So thank y'all for contributing in there. I appreciate that. So basically, what is the exponential reach, right, of the power of AI in higher education? I think general AI, because not to be confused with generative, right? General, just in general, when we talk about AI. In higher ed, it's presented this like a plethora of applications, benefits, and opportunities. So I've listed here just a few of them that come to mind. Personalized learning, we heard about if you were in one of the sessions that was just prior to this one, we heard some great things and saw some new technologies. Administrative automation is a big one, arguably one of my favorites, because it makes my day-to-day life so much more organized when I'm using any kind of, whether it's, I don't want to say their names, but the one on the iPhone, because she always answers me, or the other one that's associated with Amazon. Those two ladies, I talk to them all day, every day. But it just, it makes our lives easier. We can streamline a lot of our processes in a personal realm, but also in our professional realm too. So I want to draw your attention to improved accessibility, because as an instructional designer, one of my key or maybe my biggest focus, I would say, is that we want to design courses that are fully accessible, that meet all student needs, diverse student needs, right? And we do our best to frame that, especially for online courses. So if you put your instructional designer hat on with me, that's where a lot of my expertise is going to hopefully shine through, because I'm very passionate about creating those equal quality learning experiences for students. Research is another big one as well. So anyone who is a lifelong learner, like I am as well, it's nice to be able to adopt these different AI platforms, because back when I was working on my doctorate almost 10 years ago, what we had back then, I think, was like Zotero, where you could load in basically a source that you found, whether it's an article or a website, and it would save the citation for you in your chosen format, like APA, for instance. But there was a lot of tweaking that you had to do. Sometimes it wasn't always correct. And then it just wound up being easier to just write them all out anyway. So for any of you who have done any kind of academic research where you have to cite references in a certain format, it can go on for pages. It could take a lot of time. It's very tedious. And so nowadays, it's like you punch in a URL for an article that you like, and you can get any one of those generative AI platforms to give you a citation in any format. So that's just one example of how we could use it for research too. And then next here, there have also been several successfully implemented AI instances in higher ed, like, again, going back to the AI course design, thinking equity and inclusion. And then we have the virtual teaching assistants, which are pretty cool. So anything that's implemented into the LMS, you have Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, etc. I think the possibilities are quite endless. And I think we'll see over the next 5 to 10 years, probably a lot of improvement, not without its challenges, but a lot of improvement in that direction. So I look forward to seeing that. And then next up here, you may have noticed in the synopsis for this presentation that I included a movie quote. I am kind of a movie buff too. So with great power comes great responsibility, right? That was Spider-Man's Uncle Ben. Seems a little cliche, but it's also very true, right? When we are given access or seemingly unending access to these technologies or these platforms, pretty much anything is possible, right? And it's learning from all of our input and everything. So some of the challenges, the concerns that we're facing with this AI adoption, especially in academia, can include this whole list and then some more. This is just the top, what do you call it? The tip of the iceberg. So bias and fairness tends to be one of the ones I hear the most when I'm working with faculty. And I do see this as well, because what do they say? Garbage in, garbage out. So if students are putting garbage or what, not well-designed prompts into a generative AI tool or platform, they're probably going to get a similarly structured response back. So as we prompt engineer, as we create the different, excuse me, the different prompts that we're feeding these generative AI, we can kind of tweak it. We learn as we go, and so does the AI, which is pretty cool in my opinion. But privacy and data security, again, that's the second one on here. There's no hierarchy. These are just as they came to mind, right? But privacy and data security is something that not only we should be concerned about on an individual level or as educators, but on an institutional level, I believe, because this is something that can open the floodgates to a whole lot of other issues, including legal issues, right, for our institutions. So it's good to be aware of that and how we're using that in regards to AI, right? So take a look at this list here. Feel free to screenshot anything that you want. I will also share these slides. I meant to mention that. I will share them with Jeff and we'll get those uploaded later today. But on the very bottom one here, I did just want to draw your attention one more time to the ethical design and implementation. So not just for online courses, because as we know, a lot of times the LMS is still a very decent tool that you can use even if you're teaching face-to-face. And AI use among students, as we know, is not really going to change from online to in-person. They're all aware of it. There are various uses of it for different students. So it's really nice to just be able to set up your course, however, in the LMS where you can model for students what you want, how you want them to interact with the AI, how you want them to, maybe you don't want them to use it, maybe you do. So again, having that conversation is a really good thing to do. And then moving kind of to take a deeper dive into the bias and fairness aspect of it. There was an article on Vox last year, which the researcher's name was Sasha Luciani, and she's a part of the machine learning ethics and society team at an open source AI startup. And what she said in this article was that, quote, AI is fundamentally trained to recognize patterns, as we know, right? And complete tasks based on those patterns. So because it's going to hone in on the dominant patterns, whatever they are. And so that's why bias is such a real challenge with the development of these platforms. So now the outcomes of that, good or bad, could be fair treatment and equity opportunities. So kind of if you think of it as a SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. All of those things are good points of reference when you're collaborating with your peers, your colleagues, to kind of see how are we going to make sure that if we choose to implement some AI in our institution or in some of our practices and procedures, how are we going to ensure that there is fair treatment and equal opportunity for all the people that choose to use this, right? So mitigation. So diverse data sets and continued monitoring. How do we mitigate circumstances? Going back to the collaboration, we need regular feedback loops. We need user input, and that can be from students too. That's very important to have their perspective because a lot of times the student perspective can help us as educators or administrators to be able to create policies that actually matter to them. and will be more effective in the long run. So, excuse me. Oh, and then so regular training. I think that's the other thing too, not just attending wonderful conferences and opportunities like this to network with other practitioners in our in education, right, or technology. I think the way that we keep up to date is to refine and collaborate, right? We are updating each other on best practices, telling each other, hey, this works or this doesn't work. And I think that is where the majority of the robust policy changes and the implementation for AI in academia is going to take place. Now, this one arguably is a touchy one, and I'm not an IT expert at all, information technology. That is not my field, but I do try to be aware of when I click on things or what I agree to online. Or, you know, if I decide I'm going to use Gemini, which is the Google version of generative AI, maybe they've had an update and I have to give consent again for them to have all my information. Those little bubbles that pop up and say, you want to accept all the cookies or do you want to just choose a few? All of those things we have to be really careful and aware of. So I think first and foremost, one of the top concerns is that unauthorized access or data breaches are happening everywhere. I feel like we can't go a day or two in the news without hearing about some company that has been breached and information has been leaked. It's personal identifying information, PII, right? Sensitive data. And for students, this can be a serious big deal. It's not just their student ID, maybe it's their social security number, it's things like that. And it's good for us to be able to talk to them about it and to say, hey, don't put sensitive information into any AI platform. If it's personal identifying information, keep it to yourself, don't put it in there. But an example of this would be like if you have a university AI powered student information system or something that stores information like grades, attendance records, health data, that information could be vulnerable to hackers, which again leads to the data leaks, identity theft, and so forth. And then another top concern is that maybe we don't have clear governance or policies yet. Maybe those things are still in or not in place. Maybe they're not even being talked about. I hope they are being talked about. Some places, some institutions, and ours included at Alamo, we put out a policy last December, I believe, to take effect for this current year in January. And that I'll also share with you in a little while. So you'll be able to kind of see how it's going to evolve over time, right? But it's good to get ahead of it. And we know that generative AI especially is changing and evolving. And just knowing that any kind of policy put into place should be general, but specific enough to where it can kind of grow with the times. It's something we should also be evaluating a lot as well. But I would be remiss if I didn't suggest a couple of strategies to these top concerns too. So first and foremost, again, not an IT expert, wish I could say I were, but I know enough about technology that it's important to have strong encryption or access control. So maybe think about even multi-factor authentication. So several of us down at Alamo, we'll get this little pop-up that says, oh, you know, punch in your text or your phone number for a text, or put in your email so you can have a code generated. And that's pretty common for any platform now, especially in education. It's not ideal if you're having to do that several times a day, but we know that our information is kept just a little bit safer when we have those parameters in place. And then last but not least here for the strategies, informed consent is really important. If we are telling students, hey, we're going to use X platform and we need your consent. You know, sometimes consent can be even stated depending on the state in which you live. I know it's different. Sometimes Texas is different, Washington State, California. Just be aware of your state policies as well, because sometimes just listing something in a course or on a page is not enough. And you definitely want to make sure you're abiding by the legal parameters as well. So basically what this can do for us as educational practitioners is to, we're like effectively harnessing the benefits of AI. And while we're safeguarding the sensitive information for our students and our faculty and our staff. And that really helps build trust in a lot of ways, and all our stakeholders in the community too at large. And then I like a good visual. I don't know about you guys. I like to have color and a pop. But anyway, so going back to what I was saying, so transparency leads to accountability, and accountability builds trust. And I think more or less that's a cyclical pattern. So if we can keep those things in mind before we decide to jump on any new ed tech or any new AI platform, or maybe even as we're integrating it into our institution or our classrooms, keeping those things in mind is really important. Now, how do we do this? Documenting things, what works, what doesn't work, audit yourself as you go. If you're an instructor, meet with your department chair regularly, right? It could be involving the stakeholders, which in this case, students, right? Get their feedback. And I'm trying to think, this morning, our keynote, she mentioned, getting students involved, talking to your students about the different ways in which you are going to use AI or maybe not use AI, what that looks like by assignment or by objective, and even sharing things in this forum, right? As we kind of iron sharpening iron, we get better at what we do at our institutions with students, with faculty, as we share those best practices. And then the why. The why is pretty obvious. It's just good to state it again. But why is this important now? Well, arguably, it's important for later too, not just for now, but to ensure that ethical use, right? We're building trust, we're mitigating those potential biases, and we can simultaneously encourage growth and development. And that's really what it's all about, especially in education. So modeling those best practices too. Now, the impact here, if you kind of think of the ripple effect, right? AI adoption, as we no doubt know at this point, it impacts students and educators alike. So on the positive side, for students, I have positive and negative. I'll just load them all at once here. For student experiences, you have the positives are personalized adaptive learning. I love that that's a common thread so far in this conference. Immediate feedback and support. Now, from the educator perspective, some positives are enhanced efficiency, right? It can make your job a little bit easier. Data-driven insights, it's the ability to summarize data when there's so much of it. Sometimes it's nice to be able to use a closed loop platform, right? To keep that data safe. Anyhow, that is a positive there. And then the human elements here, these are mostly all positive in my opinion, right? This is my opinion here. Collaboration, having the oversight there, professional development. Anybody else get excited for professional development? I love being professionally developed. A student-centered approach, right? That's one of our mottos down at Alamo Colleges is students first. And that arguably, I feel like that should be everyone's motto, students first, and inclusivity, another big one. Now, if you'll notice on the first two here, we do have a couple of negatives that it's good to keep in mind, right? The bias or the unfair treatment, depending on what the generative AI has actually had in its training model, right? The security concerns we touched on. And then for the educator, though, reduced autonomy. How many of y'all have also felt the pressure to adapt to AI? Maybe you weren't sure. Maybe you, going back to that bell curve at the beginning, were one of the late adopters, which is fine. There's no right or wrong here at all. We're all different on the spectrum, right? So a lot of close friends of mine who are faculty members, they've felt that pressure in a lot of ways. And so sometimes it's not a pressure from their peers necessarily. It's maybe a pressure of just the changing times and trying to keep up with how fast it's changing and how fast, the students seemingly master that technology, right? And we're just trying to catch up to how they're using it so we can design assessments or design assignments in a more meaningful way to keep them engaged. So I think on the whole, though, all of us who collaborate and share, we're participating in this general narrative that's going to carry us into the next iteration of development and AI adoption too. So kind of moving into that, our broader societal implications, what ethical considerations might exist beyond our institutions, right? That's what I want you to think about, beyond the field of education. So think of it like accessibility, right? That's a big one. How are people accessing things? Accessing things. So an example of this might be ensuring that websites and online platforms are accessible to people with disabilities or learning differences, such as like providing screen reading technology or compatibility, or alt text for images. So this is just basic website, right? Now, a challenge for that might be that many websites or digital tools still don't fully comply with accessibility standards, even though that's the law. And again, it does differ a little bit, right, by state, but we shouldn't be excluding people with learning differences or disabilities from accessing the same information and services that we, as either like fully hearing or fully sighted people would be able to see or hear on the screen. So that's just a broader way that we can use AI to help make those things, those experiences better. As far as equity goes too, a good example of this would be providing equal access to quality education regardless, excuse me, of the socioeconomic background or someone's geographical location. So think about how we could use online learning platforms or digital resources that are equitable for all, easy to access. And again, here's the challenge with this one. There are still going to be some disparities in access to technology, or reliable internet connections, things like that, that actually widen the educational achievement gap, especially in our underserved communities across the states. So I think it's really important just to be aware of those things as we move into this next phase, right? And then finally, inclusivity. I think it's important we honor our diversity, right? An example of this would be promoting access to maybe banking and financial services through different banking apps, digital, excuse me, digital payment systems. Now, the challenge with that could be addressing those digital divide issues again. So what if all individuals who download this application don't have the necessary technology or even the skills to participate in those financial transactions? So those are just some high level examples, but feel free to drop in the chat if any of these speak to you or if you've had a personal experience or challenges with things like this. I think as we consider collectively what those challenges are, we're able to identify a solution a lot quicker when we share. So don't be shy. But really, we are on a collective journey. I think maybe we could call it a roller coaster, perhaps, toward AI, responsible AI integration. So one thing we can do, we can educate, right? Regularly participate in opportunities like this, workshops, professional development, seminars. Another thing we can do is promote. We can ensure that the way that we use AI tools, especially in the classroom, is transparent to students or our stakeholders, right? And that we maintain accountability for AI-driven decisions. That's a big one. Now, we can foster. I like a good word and a good image that helps me as a visual learner, right? But we can foster, we can actively seek out and try out different AI tools that have been designed with diversity and inclusivity in mind. So again, that is going to take an awareness of a sort, right? To consistently monitor for bias in those platforms because they're not perfect, right? Humans are imperfect. And so what we create can often be imperfect. And last but not least here, we have implement. This is the action part, right? Safeguard your students' personal information or staff too, depending on your role, right? By adhering to a strict data privacy security protocol, right? When we're using AI in any form or capacity. And so these are just some good things to keep in mind. And then, if I get my mouse to keep up with me, here's our discussion part. Now, your response will no doubt vary based on the role that you hold at your college or your university. And so I'd like you to consider this question. What ethical strategies could you employ to safeguard people and/or processes at your institution? What ethical strategies could you employ to safeguard people or processes at your institution? Now, you might already do this. And so in that case, feel free you can come off mute, you can share that way, you can drop it in the chat. I love to see whatever you're comfortable with. I'll give you an example too. For me specifically as an instructional designer, I like to weave transparency and ethics into the course design by demonstrating academic integrity through citing sources. So if I'm going, let's say I'll take well, I guess this is as ID and as instructor, because those two are so closely knit in my opinion. But if I'm doing my course that I'm going to teach for a first semester freshmen, maybe I want to use Chat GPT or Gemini or something of the sort to help generate um, different sources to help boost up the content that I have in the course. Well, I'm not going to just tell the students, hey, that's my commentary in there. No, I'm going to say, here's where I got it. Here's the prompt that I used. So that way I'm modeling for them how I would expect them to do it. And later on here in just a moment, I'll show you how I explicitly state this to them as well. But a few other examples I'm going to put up here on the screen for you. Yeah, things like establishing data protection measures, make sure they're in compliance with FERPA, right? Offer training for students, faculty, staff. A lot of instructional innovation centers or teaching and learning centers at your institution can or may already have something in place for this. And then implementing a general AI policy or procedure. And that is what I want to share with you. If you want to grab your phone, again, I'll share these links here at the end in just a moment, and you'll also have the slides later. But the syllabus statement that you'll see if you load the QR code is our district policy. And then it's my additional, not in lieu of, but in addition to the district policy is my personal AI policy for class. And so let me see if I can pause just a moment. Let me know if y'all can, if everyone is able to access that link. I've tried it a few different times. I want to just be sure that nobody is getting any error message or anything. Give me like a thumbs up if you're able to access it. Thank you, thank you. And again, these are licensed under a Creative Commons license, so feel free to beg, borrow, and steal from my policy however you want to, and or share if you have one that's been working better for you, or maybe you, or hopefully, again, going back to the auditing, audit yourself, go back each semester and see, okay, how have things changed? How have I been using this, and what's effective or what's not effective anymore? What do I need to tweak? All right. So anyone want to come off mute? Anyone brave enough? I see some chat going on, so let me take a peek at this real quick. Oh, I see Leanne MacArthur. Some of us are in the comparative. Oh, you're in the mild weather. Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm catching up on all the chat here. Oh, I see, Jeff, you put, you're concerned about the digital divide. Some students can't afford access. Yes, so true. I like free tools. And that's our chief online learning officer at Alamo, who's also my boss. He's great at encouraging us to seek those opportunities out so that we can either try them out ourselves, share them with faculty, and those sorts of things. That helps bridge that divide, right? And we just have to be aware of the students we're serving too. I see, Rosie, you put a great response in here. Your office is currently working on getting a policy approved for AI use. Awesome. When it comes to tutors. So, oh, and that's another aspect too. You know, tutors are also educators in a sense, right? Sometimes they're professionally hired tutors. Sometimes they're students who are also work study, maybe as tutors for their peers. Yeah, so that's very important because that affects probably the feedback that they're providing students, right? Susan says, I heard on NPR that one chat GPT query could power a standard light bulb for 20 minutes. That really made me think about the environmental impact. Yes, that is so true. That's something I personally haven't taken a deep dive into research on, but that is definitely on my radar. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you guys. So just keep that coming. If there's anything else, maybe some of you are still typing out some responses, feel free to add those in there. But I do want to move us forward a little bit. I know we're coming up closely on time. So just as we wrap up, I know I've talked a lot at you, but hopefully you're tracking with me. What would a presentation be without an acrostic poem, right? I find that this is one of the most effective ways for me and often students too, to retain information. So this is Gen AI as prepared by myself and my favorite personal assistant, ChatGPT, AKA Chatty. He knows that's his name when we go back and forth. So the G in generative AI would be to guard against misuse, be cautious with applications, right? Guard against misuse. E would be ethics first. Let that be what guides you. Follow ethical guidelines too. N would be never deceive, be honest, right? Avoid misleading uses of AI. Tell your students, tell your friends, your colleagues how you're using it, or definitely don't try to hide it, right? A would be account for impacts or impact. Yeah, it could be impact, the broader impact, right? Understand the effects of AI. And also that, maybe if you're not a late adopter, maybe you're an early adopter, but you have some colleagues or friends who are late adopters, just share with them how you're using it without pressure, right? It's good to show the extent that it can be used in a positive light too. And then the I would be include diverse views. So that's how you ensure those broad perspectives, right? And lastly, I would not be walking the walk if I didn't tell you that about half of this presentation was organized using generative AI. Now, excuse me, notice how I said organized, not created or generated. So what I do, and what I did for this specifically, was that I began research on my own. I will hit all the major databases with my keywords or the way that I think I want to go with a presentation, right? But so what I did was I got my sources, I went and sketched an outline. Then I ran my outline through ChatGPT 4.0 actually. So it was not the free version, but the next one up, to see if it could identify gaps for me or any redundancies I might have had. And so I took those suggestions that it made about synthesizing a few concepts that I'd actually overlooked, which was awesome. And then I went and incorporated them into this presentation. So my underlying care is that you get the transparent me, and you also have, I guess, feel empowered to work smarter, not harder. And on that note, I will conclude for today and share with you my email address here, my LinkedIn handle, which I also shared in the app that we're using, right? And then my references. So feel free to use those. Again, beg, borrow, and steal. I will paste some of this here into the chat. If y'all are copy and pasters or you like links to click on, I'm happy to share that here. And I did want to open the floor for questions in these last few minutes. If any of y'all have questions or comments, feedback, anything at all. I love to hear from participants. Or have I put y'all to sleep? Hopefully not. You're welcome.
I'll come off mute.
Yes, please.
I was typing it in chat and figured I would just talk about it. I taught an ethics class last spring term, and one of my students had been using ChatGPT, and we had talked about it. And the point that they made was the way they used it, it was engaging them a lot more with the material, because they had to keep going through the prompts to get good information. And their research project was on using ChatGPT in higher ed.
Oh. Wow.
And it was an interesting read. And once I suggested, hey, we talked about using this, why don't you include that and also cite your use of ChatGPT and be clear on what in this essay was AI generated or AI enhanced and what wasn't. And it turned out to be about 20 pages, and it was supposed to be a 12-page max, but it was good.
That's awesome. And did you provide those parameters beforehand, like with a rubric or something, where students knew what was supposed to be included specifically?
Yeah.
Good. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. See, that's the kind of use I get excited to hear about, because a lot of times all we hear is the negative side of things and how that's affecting us as practitioners and our students too.
I do have a negative one.
Go ahead. Let's hear it.
Icebreaker was watch this video and answer these prompts. And the first sentence of one of the posts was, as an AI bot, I can't watch a video.
That was submitted from a student?
Yes.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, those moments make you chuckle, right? Oh, goodness. Yeah, and that's also a learning opportunity. You can identify that, and they're probably having a moment of not shame or embarrassment, but that general feeling where you just feel that wash over you and you're like, oh man, I'm caught. I'm caught. But it gives you as the instructor, you know, a moment to practice epistemic humility, if you will, and just say, hey, I get it. I've been there. How can we do this the right way next time? How can we do this ethically, morally? Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jim. All right, Jeff, how are we doing on time? Should we keep open a little bit longer just in case we do have any more questions?
Yeah, I think so. I'm
Okay.
I'm also interested in what Alamo how I mean, you don't have to go in, we don't have enough time for a lot of detail, but what kind of policies have you gotten in,
Yeah.
and how whether or not you got student feedback on those?
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me see if I can pull up the policy real quick. And that is through the QR code, but I'll also share the link again here. Let me see. Give me just a moment to pull up my Canva. Sorry, I didn't have that one queued up there. But yeah, I'm glad that y'all are interested in that too. So it is loading. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and share. All right, let me know. Are you able to see the Canva?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is what I had linked there if y'all were able to get to the QR code. And so the one on the left here, this is the Alamo College's district statement. So pretty much very general. So this, you know, they're saying these are the different kinds, but it's not limited to these. You know, make sure that you're not violating academic integrity per the district policy. And then this is my favorite, actually. I like a little bit of gray area as, you know, wearing my faculty hat, right? I like the opportunity to say, here's what it looks like in my classroom, which is what this last statement is saying from the district policy, that faculty reserve the right to use AI detection software, blah, blah, blah. So up here in my statement, and again, you notice mine is a lot longer, but I like to give students, and I go over this with students too, whether it's synchronously or asynchronously. And I wrote this myself. So this course has a generative AI policy to acknowledge that technology, including AI, can play a supportive role in this learning process, right? I don't mandate it, but I'm open to them using it so long as they properly cite it. And then I give them examples for that as well. And then acknowledge that they received assistance. So similar to what was it? I'm sorry, Jim was saying a moment ago about you know, the specific parameters that he set for students to use it, and how to explain that, right? And how to show that they've done X, Y, Z. Let's see here. What else was the other one I wanted to show you? Oh, my very last statement. So you will be held responsible for all content you submit, whether you choose to use generative AI or not. So the point being, if they want to use it, they can. And then I give them parameters on how to, you know, you can use it for like outlining, right? I use it that way. And I tell them that. You can use it to get ideas if you're stuck, you know, maybe you need to brainstorm. You can use it for sources, which it's not great with, not the free version of ChatGPT or Gemini. Sometimes it gives you some good sources. Other times it's gibberish or the links don't work. But regardless, I like to sketch out what it could look like for them and tell them, here are the boundaries, operate within these boundaries, and you'll be fine in this class. Now, if you venture out, maybe I'll know, maybe I won't, but that's on you. So, you know, we're giving them the opportunity to be active participants in their education, where we're not dictating to them, no, you absolutely cannot, or you absolutely should. We're giving them that wide, well, me personally, I'm giving them that wide kind of area in between to be able to see what feels right for them, and how that's not compromising their academic integrity, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, unless we have any last comment or questions, I want to again thank Dr. Sanders for contributing her time and supporting this AI Institute. And thank you all for coming.
Been my pleasure. Thank y'all. See y'all at other presentations too.
That's right. We have, you can stay in this room if you're interested in the ethics track. And we've repaired the Zoom links to the other tracks. So happy days.
Thanks for moderating, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Oh no, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you again. Stop the recording.